Okay, so it's the end of the first whole day of the Global Game Jam 2018, and I'm trying to create an escape room themed game as part of that. So this is an update on what's happened so far. So the theme was announced, and the theme is a single word called transmission. Okay, so the first thing I did obviously with that is just thought of nearly like word associated things. What comes into your head with the word transmission? The first thing for me was radio transmission. So I wondered if there was maybe a puzzle whereby the objective was to restore power to a radio mast or something like that, to send a beacon or a distress signal of some sort. So the players were in a room, maybe they were marooned somehow or crash landed, and the overall objective was to send this transmission for help. I think there's possibly something in that. I'm not even sure if that's been done in a room somewhere already, but it certainly could be. And then I sort of carried on, and the next thing I thought about transmitting was data. Data transmission makes me think, for some reason, the next word that comes is intercepting. I think of people intercepting data transmissions, maybe in wartime communications being intercepted by the other side, or maybe it's more modern, kind of like cyber attacks and cryptography and intercepting messages there. Maybe you sort of intercept a signal that's going to an online bank or something, and you transfer funds to a different account. So I thought there's definitely something in there as well. But that made me more think of kind of software type puzzles, I guess. As soon as you're talking about hacking and cyber things, you're sort of losing a bit of the physical element, which is what I really wanted to concentrate on. So I wondered if there's a transmission of a more sort of raw kind of energy, like mechanical energy, perhaps a cog in a mechanical system. You can tell already that Game Jam fatigue is starting to set in, and my words are slowing slightly. So I really like this idea of a mechanical system transmitting a signal as a kind of a rotation of some sort or other. So the next thing I did was I decided to come up with some cogs to test that theory out. And remember, I'd already sort of looked at the diversifier that said use cardboard for your props. So fortunately I had plenty of cardboard lying around. And then what I did, so to design the cogs, I'm using a program called Inkscape, which is a lot like Adobe Illustrator, other than the fact it's free, and it's brilliant. It's really good for designing vector graphics of any sort, or text and things like that. But it also comes with an extension for designing cogs. So if you go to extensions, render gear, you just get this sort of wizard that gives you a couple of parameters to choose about the gears you want to create. So if I just use the defaults that are there to start with, and you'll see it creates a gear like this. Now if I want to create a sequence of gears that are going to interlock with each other and make a machine, which is how I'm sort of planning doing this puzzle, I'm going to leave all these three parameters the same, but simply change the number of gears on the teeth, the number of teeth on the gear rather. So if I just double that to 32 and create a new gear, you'll see it's been created underneath there, and move that to one side. And because I've left the pitch, distance and everything else the same, those two gears will actually interlock perfectly, and they'll be able to turn each other. So all I did was created a handful of different gears. Let's create a huge one as well. There we go. Like that. And then what I did was to print the paper picture of the gears out, stick it onto some cardboard, and cut around it like this. Okay, so sometime later, after a lot of cutting out small pieces of paper and cardboard, I have this. So I've got 4 different cogs which I've arranged on the board, and hopefully when I turn this one, you'll be able to see all of them turning in order. It's a little bit stiff obviously because the cardboard kind of gets stuck, but you can see the example of how the mechanics is going to work. So what I'm thinking at the moment is an idea that possibly different selection of cogs will be placed on the board. So I'll have kind of a number of pins. Cogs will be able to be placed, and depending on which route through the cogs that have been placed, a different message, or sort of like a different message will get transmitted. So you'll have like a source wheel that'll probably have like an alphabet of letters to have a message, and then effectively the pattern of wheels that it go through will determine an encoding, and then there'll be a kind of a destination wheel at the bottom, which will also have a pattern of letters. So it'll be like two different ciphers, or more than two different ciphers maybe, depending on the cogs that have been attached. That's my current thinking of how this might work. One thing that I quite like about having made the cogs out of cardboard, I mean, they're not hugely robust, but they're very easy to produce more copies of. But they actually could be sent in a letter. Remember, one of the other diversifiers I was thinking about was communication using letters between characters in the story. So one thing I really like is the idea that maybe two characters have different points of view or different explanations of a story, and that is represented by the cogs that they attach in certain letters. And when you use those cogs to arrange in a different way on the puzzle like this becomes like a different cipher wheel, and you get a different message out transmitted through the board representing a different interpretation based on that character. So I need to kind of think about exactly how that's going to work, but that's my my current thinking for this anyway. Now, in order to have my communication between two different characters and to have that narrative where they have kind of different subjective points of view, I need to actually have some characters now in my story. So I was sort of thinking of historical influences, and also the idea that this is a kind of a little bit like an old-fashioned mechanical computer, which obviously made me think of things like Charles Babbage and the difference engine. So I really like the idea of some kind of Victorian scientists or engineers communicating via letters, possibly disagreeing on something, and their explanations of their points of view would be communicated through these cogs. So they can be transmitting their messages to each other, and then the cogs would be transmitting as well in a different way, the rotational energy that kind of communicates their message. So I wanted some characters based on that, and then I wanted to set up some kind of conflict between those characters as to why they would have different points of view. So I like the idea of having a kind of an artist and a scientist, perhaps. It's a little bit of a cliche, but I think it's quite nice that you can get two different points of view, one from the point of view of sort of poetic, interpretive point of view, and one of the view of a very scientific, fact-based point of view. So I wanted to come up with a Victorian-ish artist and scientist character. Now, I'm not a very good artist, but I had a go. So I have my two rough character designs drawn up here. I have a scientist here, and I have an artist here. And they are going to be my two main characters in the story of my game. They're going to be communicating via letters, and in some of those letters at least, they're going to be including cogs, which somehow is going to be part of a kind of a meta puzzle, I suppose, that will maybe certain text in their letters I'll pick out in some way. So let's say I've underlined it or highlighted it in some way, and that text, when applied to a cipher made in this wheel using the cog in their letter, is going to come up with some sort of code here. That is pretty much where I'm up to at the moment, but I'm going to carry on and kind of think of some more ideas and kind of firm up those ideas, and I'll give you an update after that.